Well, good afternoon. Could you hear me? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Every day some hitches were there. This is the problem with the online business. Anyway, we are not too late. 3 minutes late. Okay. So one small announcement. You may be already knowing it, that we will hold one quiz on Monday. Okay. So around the same time, now you will receiving the instructions by tomorrow sometime. So it will be 10 marks quiz. Okay, but I will be giving you only a half an hour. So the question should be very small type, and you can finish it within half an hour. So it will be 10 marks. Then me and Professor Murugavel will decide how to adjust it. Along with the the rest of the marks of 50 or 30 or 40, we will see it later at the end same. So accordingly we will adjust it, but only one request, since I have a plan to take the class for the rest 1 hour or 40 minutes depending, or 50 minutes depending on how do you finish it. So please join the quiz program 5 minutes before. That means 1:55 all of you should be joining. Instruction will come to you, otherwise we will close it. Okay, is it fine? Hello, please unmute and talk to me a little bit. You understand now what I have said?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Acha, this is one point, and second point, fourth, which is a holiday, of course. Would you be attending the class or not really? Which one is correct? Then accordingly, I will prepare the thing. Hello, you have not answered me so far. So fourth, I will hold the class or I don't hold the class. Which one is correct?
Sir, some students are uncomfortable in a 4th November. So can we shift the class to next day or some 2 days?
I have no problem, but you have to give me the timing. So what I am trying to suggest to you, so any day would be equally fine for me. So I need one extra class, not extra actually. I'm losing one class now. So, and since I'm getting a little bit less number of classes this time, and one loss would be a big loss. In the sense, whatever I plan to cover, I should be given the opportunity to cover it. So in that sense, if you give me one slot, any day of your mutual convenience, I'm not talking about 1 or 2 students, I'm talking about the whole class. If you feel that you could manage to have one particular day, please let me know. Otherwise, as you have rightly expressed your views that fourth, you people are not very comfortable in taking, which is understandable. I do agree with you, but if possible, give me a time. If you don't give me a time, then Monday after quiz, I will take 1 hour class, and that will be the end of the story for this year. Okay, so let me begin with, I think last class, we started to understand this EPR-G parameter. Now, EPR-G parameter is one of the important components by which one could understand variety of aspects relating to the electronic interactions in the molecular framework or molecular setup. I'm talking about the paramagnetic molecular setup. It could be 1 unpaired electron, it could be more than 1 unpaired electron. So many issues are involved. So we will discuss one by one. Now, it is very diagnostic. EPR-G parameter is very diagnostic to the location of electron in a particular molecule. That is very important. As I said, that from organic molecular point of view, you have only one variable over there. The unpaired electron, if it is so, it would be residing on the organic molecule somewhere. An exact location could be figured out by looking at your hyperfine coupling process as well as by density functional theory calculation, where you will be getting the spin density, and you could figure it out theoretically the location of spin, and then you can correlate the spin density location along with your splitting pattern. So you can correlate it, and then you can make a very convincing argument in favor of the location. Okay, so the G won't be matter much over there, because it will be, as we know, that theoretical G value of 2.00 something, depending on the exact location of the electron in the molecular setup. But when you go into the metal complexes, even if you consider the very simple molecular setup of 1 unpaired electron, the question always arises from the electronic structural point of view, the location of electron. Now there are three options you have in hand. One option is it could be on the ligand side, it could be on the metal side. These are the two extreme possibilities: 100% on the metal side, 100% on the ligand side. Both are equally probable depending on what kind of metal and what kind of ligand you are considering. The net result is fixed that you have one unpaired electron. The question appears where this unpaired electron is located. Is it located on the metal side or on the ligand side, the two extreme? But now you have in-between situation. In-between situation is that if it is being delocalized over the molecular setup or a particular segment of the molecular setup, then unpaired electron could be shared between the metal and ligand at the interface. Now, if it is being shared, then the next question comes up over there: what percentage of electron, what we talk about with a dot, that is our convention, but it is essentially, all of you know it, is a kind of wave function over there, right? So the density could be dominating on the metal side or on the ligand side. It could be 80-20, it could be 60-40, it could be 30-70, whatever the combinations are. But the good point of the whole story is the EPR would let you know that what is the exact composition of the unpaired spin at the metal ligand interface, and that we call, in terms of our chemical or physical language, the electronic structure aspect. That means how the electrons are being distributed within the framework or within the molecular setup in case of smaller molecular system. So the G value would help us to understand, with respect to the standard G value. Okay, now that's why G value is very, very important parameter to understand the electronic structure, like chemical shift in NMR, as I already talked about that. Now, if you look at that, just a second, let me go. Yeah. Now I said this part also. Now, if you have one molecule, whether organic, inorganic, doesn't matter much, and if the molecule does have unpaired spin, so once you put that molecule in a particular manner into a EPR spectrometer, and you will be getting the EPR resonance. Okay, provided all other parameters, I'm talking about technical parameters, are being well set, then you will be getting the resonance. Okay, and that resonance will never tell you what is the G value for that particular the response what you are getting out of your instrument for your compound, right? So you need to use on rider, right? You could remember that for NMR we use the TMS, right? TMS we consider as a 0, and with respect to TMS we can calculate the chemical shift, okay, either at the positive side or at the negative side of TMS. So here also similarly we have to use one rider which is having a standard G value. Okay, so if you mix that standard compound along with your own compound in the same solution and apply the frequency, the one single frequency, to get the resonance, then your only variable would be the magnetic field. Now, if you have that magnetic field for your unknown compound and for your rider known compound, and for rider you know the G, So we can talk about G1 H1 equal to G2 H2, where G1 H1 are associated with the rider and both are known, and G2 is not known for your unknown compound, but certainly H2 is known. So you can easily calculate the G2. And how it is being shifting from the rider, that is very important to look at. The rider is a perfect free radical, right? So you need to choose the good rider. Okay, like NMR, here also we have only 2 riders available. 2 riders in those are reliable rider, and those are I should say one is stable under normal conditions or ambient condition, another is stable under inert condition. So this is, we call it TCNE, which is a very commonly used rider for across the globe. Everybody uses this rider, TCNE radical. TCNE is not the radical, but you have to generate the radical. And remember, this is very reactive radical. So you have to keep it always in the sealed tube. Okay, and you can see it in our setup over here at IIT Bombay Chemistry Department or at the site. You can one time visit and see how the rider, they preserve the rider. Okay, very expensive, of course. Now, but reactive, you cannot cut the tube, then immediately it will go back to this position, the oxidized state, with the reduced state. Now, this rider, if you look at, as per there are 4 nitrogen, so there will be 9 line spectrum. Okay, but if you use a very small concentration of the rider, then all would be resolved and it would give you 1 line spectrum, right? Similarly, another rider is also very popular. The advantage of this radical is very stable radical. You can keep it on your brainstorm, nothing will happen. Unlike the previous one. But a section of people believe this is the better radical, and a section of people believe, I think most of you believe this is a better radical. Okay, it doesn't matter. So if you have, as I said to you, that if you have, say, this is your compounds response. Okay, this blue one, and let us consider the black one your rider response, right? So rider H, you can easily figure it out because under same frequency we are measuring both together. So this is the rider H. Rider G is known for DPPH. It is 2.0036, and for your this one for TCNE 2.0023. Okay, and then this is your isotropic signal of your compound. So you have to take a point. Either you can take the T, but the convention is you better to take which this the starting baseline where it touches at the central line. So you have to draw a tangent. This is a hand-drawn thing particularly. So you will never get a straight line like that. You will be getting a little bit of angle over here. So you draw a tangent, and then it touches at one point. Or in a conventional way, let us put that you extrapolate this line, it will touch here, and this is the point you consider the H value for your unknown compound. But always you have to show that what point you are touching to calculate the age of your unknown compound. Then you have let us assume that your rider comes at 3200 Gauss, and this is the rider's G value, and your unknown is coming hypothetically 3000. So naturally you can calculate the G value of your compound, and you will always see that G value of your compound, if it is not perfectly radical, okay, it will be deviating from the rider. The rider is the best possible radical available, right? Okay, and then accordingly you will see the deviation, and based on the deviation you could question yourself the location of electron in a metal complex. Okay, if it is very close, that means 2.00 something for rider. So you will be having say 2.0 something. 2.0 something means that you are approaching towards the rider. That means the radical center. That means the electron density is mostly localized onto one of the ligand centers. But if you move towards away, further away from the radical, that means the value G value say 2.1 something, 2.2 something, 2.3 something. That means progressively you are moving towards the metal side. Okay, once you have the electron density, localized on the metal, your G value would be much higher because of the spin orbit coupling. Okay, we know already all these things. So now this G value is very, very important from one to what issue I said just now, that the location of the electrons either metal side or the ligand side. We'll talk a little bit later on more about it. But in the meantime, let me put it this way. Now in inorganic chemistry, okay, if you look at the chronological growth of this chemistry, it started from valence bond theory, it moved to crystal field theory, it moved to ligand field theory, and so far it seems to be the end of the road, but that is not really true all the time. There is no further progress beyond the ligand field theory, right? All of you know that. As far as the inorganic chemistry is concerned, in many occasions, what happened that this is a good progress, and it could probably answer your queries. I'm talking about scientific queries about the metal complexes, okay, up to a 90%, 95% level. But there are many queries and questions and experimental observations which cannot even be addressed by the fact of your ligand field theory. So that means there is a scope for further progress in that direction. New discoveries are needed to address those issues. So leave it aside. Now, if you leave it aside, then one question which is shuttling between valence bond to ligand field, that is the metal ligand interaction is, the way we present, that is for our understanding purpose. That the major question is whether it's a kind of covalent interaction or it's a kind of ionic interactions. So this is the pertinent questions, and many people have tried to address these issues in a variety of ways, and we have also talked about it to some extent. For example, the iridium examples what I have given to you, where the splitting I talked about, the iridium chloride interactions which are being nicely reflected into the spectral profile, and it varies from one salt to another salt. That example we talked about last day, and there we have shown that that interaction vanishes in Z direction in one case because of the tetragonally elongated situation compared to the other case. So all this fact tells us that there is a kind of metal ligand orbital overlapping. Okay, covalency means orbital overlapping, and what extents it is been overlapping. That is another issue which comes to understand the electronic structural aspect. So certainly we will not go deep inside of all sort of issues, but I will try to give you some impression about it in later on and also today a little bit. That metal ligand, that overlapping, that extend to dictate us variety of issues, particularly the biological systems, to answer how the molecular or metalloproteins behaves, right? So there is a very simple equation. You must have seen that equation earlier. So without going deep, it's a combined equation where you would have G could be back calculated if you know the certain parameters, the spectroscopic parameters I'm talking about. Now, if you look at this equation having 10 dq, now this 10 dq is essentially the delta value what you get out of the crystal field. Now, this 10 dq, which could be estimated very easily by looking at your absorption spectrum. Now, absorption spectrum, what you get, in terms of the UV visible spectrum, particularly the visible spectrum, where the lowest energy transition is essentially taking place, in terms of DD transitions between the lower energy electronic level to the next energy electronic level. So that is the 10 dq, right? Okay, so that you can get easily if you record the electronic spectrum of that molecule. Now, another issue is that that's lambda. Lambda means spin-orbit coupling. And the origin of the spin-orbit coupling, you already know that that L and S vector of a particular electron, okay, they would remain independent, okay, and they could be coupled also. Now, independent wise, if you go back to the magnetic side, the magnetic side is basically the movement of the charged particle. So if electron rotates along its own axis or along the orbit, but electron always rotates through its own axis while moving through the orbit, right? So you can have mu L equation, you can have mu S equation, right? But most of the times you will see that mu L equation does not fit well with the experimentally observed values. So we have only two options in hand. That experiment is the end of the road, I said. And all of you know it, that whatever you will be getting out of a good machine, that is the fact. Whether we can explain it or we cannot explain it. This is the human limitations. Today I cannot explain something, tomorrow someone could explain it. So that's fine. That's how the science grows. Okay. Now the point of concern is that I said the orbital motion is being quenched all the time. Mostly, not necessarily 100%. So experimental observed values either matching with the mu S equation or with the combined one. Combined one means if you draw one L and then S along the X and Y axis, then through the origin it passes through. That means it is represented by J. And when J is considered to be good, J is considered to be good if LS coupling is strong enough. If LS coupling is not strong enough, J is not good. So we get the multiplet between the ground state and the fast excited state. If multiplet is very high, okay, that means the ground state and fast excited state, the delta E is sufficiently large. That means LS coupling is strong enough over there. And in that case, what will happen that your entire population would be at the ground state. Otherwise, if the gap is low, very low, that means all the levels should be populated. Or if gap is intermediate, a partial population would be there. That could be back calculated. Okay, all the things could be done, and you can tell that that for your molecule, how the molecules are being distributed among all the levels depending on the thing. And you know that the room temperature KT, what you call it for Boltzmann constant and temperature, KT is around 200 centimeter inverse. If the gap is within 200 centimeter inverse, so you should expect to have the excited state mixing with the ground state. Okay, and if the gap is much more than 200 centimeter inverse, that means only the ground state or slightly depending on what is the difference, excited state population. Now you could argue why I'm talking all these things. I'm talking all these things because if you do the magnetic calculations, you have to know the population density. Okay, now if you consider all the time that only 100% ground state populated, then you will see it will never match with your experimental observed load in many molecules, not all molecules, in many molecules. So you need to take into account the percentage of excited state contribution. So all sort of calculations, etc., one could manage to do it, and you will be getting very precise values based on that. Okay, now everything depends on the fact of how strong the lambda is. Okay, but good point is, as you know, lambda depend on the size of the atom. Lambda depend on the oxidation state of the atom. Hot iron 2, iron 3, which is a different lambda. Okay, and if you go down the series, you see, for example, iron 3. If I keep the same group, the same oxidation state, iron 3, ruthenium 3, osmium 3, the same series group, na? So lambda increases from 500 centimeter inverse to 1000 centimeter inverse to 3000 centimeter inverse. So along the group it increases. Oxidation state, if you increase it, further increases, because everything depends on how the interactions between the L and S. So lambda is known in the literature. If you open any book or any internet, you will be getting the lambda for that particular metal ion. Okay, if it is nickel is different, copper is different, oxidation state varying, lambda would vary. So all standard values are known. And for any compound, 10 dq you can easily estimate. Now your alpha, it depends on essentially what is the ground term. Now you have to go, all are correlated. You cannot try to understand anything in isolation. You have to put all these things together to have a better perceptions of the whole situation. So this alpha is based on the ground term, and then K actually is the kappa. Kappa means orbital reduction factor. That means it will tell you that if it is the ionic, then kappa would be 1. That means the compound it's a basically electrostatic interactions. Okay. Or if kappa is lower than 1, then your covalency develops. Okay. And then if it is much lower, that is more covalent, and all sort of things would be reflected in your experimental parameters, etc. etc. Now let us take 2 examples. Very simple example. Now if I take that nickel compound, okay, nickel is octahedral, of course, D8. That means 2 ampere electrons are there. Okay. Now what you can do here, nickel, you see that alpha is known. 10 dq you can get out of the absorption spectrum, and then nickel 2, you could remember probably how the term value is being calculated, ground term. So ground term could be calculated. That is equal to L equal to your 2 plus 1. That means F term, and this is the spin multiplicity 2s plus 1. So you have essentially 2 unpaired electrons. So S equal to 1, 2 into 1 plus 1. So 3F is the ground term. Now how the 3F could be splitted, that is again depending on what is the electronic configuration. Already you know it, because nickel 2 means D8. So D8 means your ground term starts with the A. But if you go to the same 3F for your D2 case, whole equivalence 10 minus 8 equal to 2, that is ground term also 3F. But there what is happening, unpaired 2 electrons are in the 3 orbitals T2. So there are 3 ways to put in, so that will be triplet. But here you have nickel case, that is in the E orbital, 2 electrons unpaired. So the 2 electrons in 2 orbitals, the possibility is only 1. So the A will be the ground term, then first one will be the T, second one will be the T, keeping the spin multiplicity intact. Already you know all these things, and this is the A term, how it is being originated. Now if it is A term, then alpha would be 4. This is the standard value. Now if you put all these things, you will be getting, and G you will be getting through your EPR. You record the EPR of this molecule, G you will be getting it. Then you can back calculate your K. And you see the K is coming 0.93. 0.93 means what? Certainly it is not ionic. It is covalent. This interaction is covalent. But this covalency is not a great interaction, because it is rather close to 1. Okay. But if you go to the next example, so the copper example, a copper example, if you do the same calculation knowing the fact that you know the G value, okay, and then if you go for K is 0.69. Okay, this is your 10 dq, 0.69. That means it is much better in terms of covalency, right? That means metal ligand orbital mixing is much stronger in case of copper, this particular compound compared to. Now you cannot make any prejudgment. So you have to do all these things together, and then you what happened, this is necessary once you try to understand the spectroscopic feature of the molecule, okay, and then you need to know all these things. So on the other hand, if you know the K, you can back calculate the G value, and that G value you can compare with your experimental observed G value, and you will be seeing a quite reasonable, agreement between the calculated and the experimental G parameters. Okay, and that is how the G parameters for any molecule could be derived out of a lot of good programs are available nowadays. Of course, you have to remember that EPR is much a difficult system to follow, because it involves the excited state. It takes a relaxation process. I have mentioned to you earlier also. The relaxation is such a serious problem here. That's why in many occasions you will be missing the spectrum in spite of the fact of the paramagnetic nature of the molecule. Okay. So that is not for NMR is not. If you have a diametric molecule, always you'll be getting NMR. If you don't get the NMR, that means there is a problem with your molecule or problem with the instrument. So there is no way of missing NMR. But EPR, many occasions, you may be missing the EPR resonances, even for a single electron. Multi-electron, so quite often you will miss it. Because of single electron, you will be missing it due to the the relaxation issues. So that's why it is called in one sense the excited state based spectroscopy, though it is not so literally. So now you could argue now that is G parameter necessary to understand the location of the spin only, or to understand your extent of covalency in the molecular spectrum? Not really. These are two important points what we have addressed already. Now another point which is very important from the metal metal complex point of view. Now metal complex point of view, I said that the symmetry is very important as far as the metal complexes are concerned, because organic molecule symmetry, of course it is important, but I should say rather easy to follow it. Okay, you must have gone through your group theory classes, etc. And you have
Hello,
seen
sir.
Hello.
Sir, the meeting, I think it will stop in 5 seconds.
What was?
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, what to do? Helpless. Things are going bad. Anyway, now what we are saying that if you have metal complexes, then the question comes about the symmetry. Okay. Now symmetry could be addressed in a reasonable way by following the EPR also. For example, if you have an isotropic situation means I am talking about that all the ligands around the metal centers are identical. Now here you have to remember, you cannot take the chelated ligands. If you take chelated ligands, then the chelate effect comes into the picture, and you never get identical isotropic situation, where the angle won't be 90 degree. Most of the times it will be deviated from, or not most, in all occasions it will be deviating from 90 degree, the bite angle I'm talking about. But if you take monodentate ligand, for example, AM-hexa-aqua, 6 water molecules, then there is no question of bite angles, no question of chelate effect. So you will be getting perfectly octahedral situation. And that perfectly octahedral situation, I'm talking about only metal complexes, not organic ligand. So that will give you one isotropic signal, as you could see it over here. Now this isotropic signal means Gx equal to Gy equal to Gz, that the way it is being mentioned over here. And in that case, you will have only one G, which is called the G isotropic or G average. That will be the center point G with respect to your standard. And in the absorption mode, you can show like this, right? Now you have two more type of, this is a purely cubical system, what you talk about, okay? But if you go for tetragonal situation means where you have a C4 symmetry, right? C4 is there, the D4H symmetry. Okay, many occasions you will be seeing either in a square planar or in the octahedral, either elongated or compressed situations. And there you will have a situation the Gx equal to Gy not equal to Gz. That means you will have Gx, Gy, Gz in a bulk has of no meaning. Bulk, all directions are averaged out, either in solution particular. But in solid state, you can fix one axis as Gz, then other two would be the Gx, Gy. So that could be fixed while recording the single crystal EPR, not the bulk powder EPR or bulk solution EPR. So bulk, we call it G1, G2, G3. And in the crystal, we call it Gx, Gy, Gz. So what will happen if you have a situation, right, that, say metal tetraamine diaquo. If you take that one, that means the 4 amine molecules along the X-Y plane, let us assume that way. That means X and Y direction, the ligand fields are same. but along the Z direction you have the two aqua molecules. So that is different than X and Y. That means Gx, Gy would be identical and Gz would be identical, not identical. So that's why you will have the two responses. That one you call whatever it is Gz, then other will be Gx, Gy. Now under that is called the axial situation. Now under that circumstances you have the two options. One option is what it is shown over here. That means this is the Z direction. The Z direction means I already said that your applied magnetic field would always be fixed in such a way that it is parallel to the Z directions. And if it is so, then what will happen? Most of the molecules will try to stay away from the applied magnetic field. They will repel. So the concentration of the molecules would be along the perpendicular direction, that is X and Y. So that's why X and Y is defined as the G perpendicular and Z direction is defined as the G parallel. And if you see, the intensity of G parallel would always be much lesser compared to the G perpendicular because of the less number of molecules in that directions. Now that could be reversed also. That Gz may appear at the lower magnetic field. The magnetic field increases in these directions. So Gz is appearing at the lower magnetic field in a tetragonally elongated situation, and Gxy, that means G perpendicular, would be appearing at the higher magnetic field directions. And if you take the compressed situation, there what will happen? The reverse pattern. That means your perpendicular will appear at the lower magnetic field direction and the parallel will appear at the higher magnetic field direction. Why it is so? This diagram would help you to understand. Just a second. Yeah, look at. Now this is the same situation, G parallel, and this is G parallel, this is G perpendicular. And the compressed situation is, this is your G parallel, G perpendicular, this is G parallel. Now already we know it. Say in the copper 2 case if you take, or chromium 1 case, whatever you take. Now if it is elongated, that means the repulsion along the Z direction would be less. It is elongated, no? Would be less. And less means your Z square, the Eg level under octahedral, the G square energy would be lower than X square minus Y square. So that's why the this is the Gz, that resonance will appear at the lower magnetic field because H nu equal to G beta H, directly proportional at the lower magnetic field. But if you go for the compressed situation, what will happen? The bond length along the X and Y direction would be longer compared to the G directions. That means the repulsion is more in the XY plane compared to the perpendicular plane. And as a result, X square minus Y square energy would be lower. So your unpaired electron would be over here. And that is how your G parallel, that means, G perpendicular, that means XY would be appearing at the lower magnetic field region compared to the other one. Okay, that means G parallel one. So by looking at the spectrum of your compound, you could define it whether it is isotropic. So isotropic situation is very rare. It will be only appearing in case of your homoleptic monodentate situation. All the ligands are same, all are monodentate, then only. Or you can have this situation for heteroleptic situation where all the ligands are not same, highly distorted molecule, if you do the measurement at room temperature. But if you go for the measurement at the low temperature, based on the symmetry, you will have one axial situation, and within that axial situation, that means C4 or D4H group, if it is there, within the axial situation, you will have the two different patterns based on the elongation or the compression. Now, if it happens that all the ligands are different, say M, A2, B2, C2, that means say metal, diaco, amine and dicyano. That means each axis are ligand field wise different. Then in that case, again Gx, Gy would be splitted. So you'll have Gx, Gy, Gz. But don't forget, it is not permissible to talk about Gx, Gy, Gz until you take the single crystal. It is always advisable to start with G1, G2, G3. So this is called rhombic scenario. Now to understand the rhombic and axial scenario, this is the crystal field model. You can easily understand it. Now you look at, let us assume that you are talking about one low spin situation, or high spin, whatever. We'll say low spin situation. Say D5. Now D5 low spin means all the electrons would be in the T2G level. Now this is your T2G level. Now T2G level would remain degenerate under a certain condition, but based on the chelate and all sort of things, as you know, that T2G level will further be splitted. How it will be splitted? It could be splitted as a B and A. B means two orbitals would be together, and A means one orbital could be together. Now, for our general understanding, I have drawn it this way. You could have drawn it also other way. That means XY would be higher than XZ, YZ, depending on the molecule or the ligands. So let us assume this is the standard setup, and you can distribute the 5 again. And in between, whatever you will be getting, that is the isotropic situation. Now, what will happen? That axial situation, you will have this one, and then this XY or X and Y, these two orbitals could be also further splitted into the two. Then you have further, splitting, and this splitting could vary depending on what kind of ligands you are using. So this is the rhombic situation. Rhombic situation, your X, Y, and Z would be completely different. And in axial situation, two X and Y would be same, Z would be different. So this is how one could represent this way. And if you look at the next one, the same representation, this is your absorption mode, and this is your derivative mode. Now what is happening? In the isotropic situation, you have X, Y equal to Z. If you have axial situation, there are two options: XY greater than Z, XY less than Z, greater than Z. So that will be reflected in the G parameters also. And for rhombic situation, nothing is same. That means X, Y, and Z all are different, and these are different in terms of the ligand field. What kind of ligands you are using over there? Okay, and that will be reflected in the form of G. So G values would tell you whether the electron is localized on the metal or not. Well, if it is localized on the metal, then naturally G value would be much different compared to the free radical G value of 2.0023 or 2.0036. Okay, and how much it is different, that tells you whether at all any electron density being diffused onto the ligand in that particular compound or not. If no ligand is impacted on the electron density point of view, then G value would be 2.3, 4, 5, etc. But if it is somewhere in between, so it will be coming closer to 2.0. That means 2.1, 2.08, 2.09, all sort of values would be there. So once you start practicing, you would understand in a better way. So yeah, these are all the same things I am talking about. Okay. And you see that again, you can understand in a simplified manner that if you talk about, I said now, when you have taken the elongation or elongated form, there you will be seeing that GZ absorption would be at the lower magnetic field. That means if you increase the magnetic field in these directions, and you see that what happened, the parallel directions along the elongated situation, it is happening at the lower magnetic field directions. In that case, the perpendicular scenario is happening at the higher magnetic field direction. So that's why you're getting this thing. But in a compressed situation, this pattern would be completely reversed this way. Okay, as already we have talked about it. Now, once we understand the G thing, then two more things we need to understand as far as the EPR is concerned. What is called the ZFS? ZFS means zero field spreading. and other thing is the Kramer's degeneracy. Now, it is not in EPR, but in general, what happened, we have two types of situations. One called the Kramer's situation, other called the non-Kramer situations. The Kramer's situation means where you have more than one odd number of electrons in your system. I'm not talking about the electrons on the ligand. I'm only talking about the electrons at the metal site in a metal complex. More than one, but odd number. That means 3, 5, 7, 8, 9. These are called Kramer's system. And other system is where it's called your non-Kramer system. Non-Kramer system means you have paired number or even number of unpaired electron in the system. Even number means it has to be more than one. So 2, 4, 6, 8 and all sort of things. I would like to add one point over here. From the chemistry point of view, any unpaired electron containing system having more than one unpaired electron, that means paramagnetic molecule, EPR would be very nasty. And many occasions it goes beyond our understanding. Okay, first point. Till today, okay, EPR is pretty good as far as the one electron system is concerned. Two electron system is not bad, still it's okay. But when you move in, even 4 or even number of unpaired electron is not too bad. 4 unpaired electrons is also one could understand well with the EPR, no problem. If the condition is fixed properly through the relaxation aspect. But once you have more than one unpaired electron, in most of the occasions you will be missing the EPR profile. Most of the occasions, not necessarily every time. You will be missing the unpaired electron. Why it is? Because of the first part of this thing, the ZFS, zero field splitting. Now, if the zero field splitting is within the limit, you could see it. Why I'm talking about it? The reason is that every instrument has its own limitations in terms of energy profile and in terms of lifetime, right? As you know that EPR time scale is not too fast. It is just 10 to the power minus 8 second. So it's okay, but it's not too fast. If the technique is very fast or electron movement is very fast, free electron movement, you know, 10 to the power minus 15 second. And if it is too fast, then EPR cannot detect naturally. So it is reasonable when the electron is confined to any molecule. The movement would be different. Right? It is restricted by the orbitals and all sort of things. So that could be detected. Other problem is that zero field splitting. Zero field splitting means that the splitting of the state would take place even in the absence of magnetic field. So magnetic field, in presence of magnetic field, the splitting of the labels, what we see, that is called the Zeeman effect. We know that. Nah? Now there are two types of splitting one could have. One is in the absence of the magnetic field, other is in the presence of the magnetic field. The absence of the magnetic field is, if the splitting is too high, then it goes beyond of the energy domain of EPR, that is microwave region. Okay, if the transition requirement is more than the microwave region, okay, that energy content, then naturally there won't be any transition. That's a common problem what you see in case of more than one unpaired electron. So let me put it this way. So you just try to understand in a very simplified manner. Okay. Now if you see that one particular ion, if you take D7. Now D7 means you have 3 unpaired electron, right? And the ground term we can easily calculate 4F. Is a standard, we know how to calculate the ground term. Nah? And this 4F could be split into, already we know it, 4T1, 4T2 and 4A2. How it is so, already we said in case of that kappa calculations for nickel D8 and all sort of things we have done so. Here also you can calculate, and this is very important to understand the electronic spectral feature in terms of DD transition, not charge transfer transitions. Now here you see that electronic spectroscopy, that this gap is too high for EPR. but this is quite good for the UV visible region, that energy. That's why you can see that these transitions through the UV visible spectroscopy. But once you have the EPR, the energy is much lower, below the IR, na? Okay, so much lower. So if it is much lower, then EPR won't be effective over here. Then what will happen? These will be splitted further, and that is the crystal field effect here. So here what will happen, as I have written, L and S coupling will take place, and then you will have the 3 states. Huh? So if you do minus half to 3/2, so basically half to 5/2, half to 5/2. So there are 3 states. Again, this gap, if this gap is high, because this is called in the absence of applied magnetic field. You have not applied the magnetic field up to this. So these are the built-in situation within the molecule. Now, if this gap is very high, then what will happen? High means I'm talking about H nu for this is greater than the EPR limited H nu. Then naturally you should not see any transitions over here. What do you see in presence of magnetic field? In that case, that this half, this is the J. Now this half would be splitted further, plus minus half, in presence of magnetic field. So this is the place where you can have the transition CPR, because this is within the domain of H nu. It cannot go here, it cannot go here if this gap is too far. This is called zero field splitting. Okay. Now what I said, if the splitting is high enough, then you don't see any transitions over here and any transitions within the Zeeman levels, no transition. Rather, you could see only the transitions between the lower level. And when we say the Kramers doublet means each level is essentially coupled with the many plus minus levels, right? So in this case, it is double, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, and it is 6 states are the microstates are there here. You already know that. Nah? So we have 3 situations under the concept of the plus minus 5/2. One is there is no zero field impact. That means if we consider there is no zero field, that means this won't be splitted. So the maximum term is the 5/2, which will be splitted, and that would cover all the terms in between, micro terms, right? 3/2 plus 5/2 means 3/2 and half, both are there in a plus minus sense. And in magnetic field presence, they would be splitted like this, as it is shown. That covers everything. Where the zero field effect is 0, no zero field effect. Now I said the molecule is very funny. We see the solid powder somewhere, we see the solution somewhere. But we cannot see the inside. And that is how EPR is so important to understand the electronic features of the molecule. Okay, it is more of physics inside, but the application part is more of chemistry. Because physics, they do all the understanding processes. Unfortunately, they don't have any molecule. Molecule belongs to chemistry. So they can take the chemical items and try to understand the physical aspect out of that. Now, if there is no zero field effect, that means what will happen? All the levels would have the same gap. Energy delta E is same. So you'll be getting one line. So though you have more than one unpaired electron, you'll be getting one line. Okay. Of course, whether this one line one could argue is a ligand-based signal. No. Then you have to find out the bandwidth. Bandwidth means from this absorption peak and this absorption peak difference delta E in terms of H. That means you have one H over here, H1, here H2, because this axis, x-axis is H. So that means delta H, that would be, free radical would be very sharp, small delta H. And this delta H would be large enough, and you can figure it out. Huh? Say 2 Gauss or 10 Gauss or 50 Gauss, all you can calculate. But the signal, though it looks like isotropic one signal, but you would be seeing it your higher delta difference in peak difference. Okay, peak separation, I should say that way. Now, if you have a moderate zero field splitting, moderate zero field splitting means 5/2 plus minus would now be split. You could see over here, this is half, this is 3/2, this is 5/2, right? Now they are being splitted, so minus to plus in between 3.5, right? And here you will see these are all following the standard selection rule. Delta MS equal to, these are all delta MS equal to plus minus 1, right? Here also it is being followed in each case, but the gap is different. You see that this gap is smaller, this gap is different. So as a result, you will have 5 transitions. So it's a moderate zero field splitting. Okay, and this gap would fall into the H nu applied. So you will have the resonances and you will have 5 lines. Now on the other hand, if the very strong delta zero field splitting like this, what you have shown over here like this, and the splitting would be like this, I have shown over here. So minus 3/2 to plus, minus 5/2 plus 5. So nothing will happen, only this transition will take place. And then you will be seeing these transitions with the G parallel, G perpendicular, axial type, rhombic. It could be rhombic type also. I have shown in terms of axial type, it could be rhombic type also. Now remember, as of now, what we have said over here for Cramer's doublets and the Cramer's degeneracy or odd electron system, more than one, we are only concentrating on the fact that unpaired electron is present on the metal center in a metal complex, and we are not taking into account any consideration of hyperfine constant due to the metal nucleus spin or due to your super hyperfine splitting. Due to the I of the donor sites. We have not considered it. Because if we consider, then each line would be splitted further. Actually, it will happen. Instrument will give you the resultant item. So you have to interpret it. Now I have segregated it. Why I have segregated? To help you to understand that if you have more than one unpaired electron, and then what will be the scenario around that metal centers without considering the fact of the hyperfine, super hyperfine, or sort of interaction. So there will be the 3 situations. Now that is being written over here. You can just read through, all the things are written over here. Now what I am trying to mean that again, if you have more than one unpaired electron, then in many occasions, if not in most occasions, you would be essentially missing your EPR, because in any case your H nu for the instrument is fixed, and the zero field splitting parameter would, if it goes beyond that instrumental allowed frequency, say this much, okay, naturally there won't be any transition, and as a result you may miss the EPR spectra even if you go below to 4 around 4K. But not always. There would be many cases you would be. So my experience is you have to be triply careful while dealing with the molecule having more than one odd number of electrons. Similarly, you have a situation which is relatively better because zero field splitting is also here, but which is under control. If you have more than, or if you have even number of electrons, and there is no question of more than, even number of electrons. So the immediate option is the 2 unpaired electron. Now 2 unpaired electron, one system we can think about, say any nickel 2 system. Nickel 2 is a D8 or platinum 2, whatever you consider, low spin, high spin, doesn't matter, right? Always you will have the 2 unpaired electron into the EG level. Now let me tell you the first observation and then explain it. The nickel 2 octahedral compound, if you take, you will never get the EPR spectrum. This is a fact. You take one nickel 2, there are so many nickel 2 compounds are available. if you are lucky enough, for few cases people have observed at 4K, not even 77K, but mostly you'll be missing it. 77K certainly you'll be missing it. The reason I will come back to you now. Now, for an even number of electrons, say 2 electrons, look at your spin would be 1, 0, plus minus 1. Nah? Is a triplet molecule, 2 unpaired electrons. Now, 2 unpaired electrons, there are 2 situations. One is the 3 situation. One, they can remain parallel, then S equal to 1. One, they can remain anti-parallel, then your S equal to 0. That is the EPR inactive anyway. Now, within this parallel, again, you have 2 options. They are magnetically interacting. Okay, if they interact, you have one situation. And if they are magnetically not interacting, then you are essentially dealing with the 2-1 unpaired electron setup. Am I right? The 2 unpaired electron in our molecule, that means the molecule having 2 dipoles, right? Now, what is happening that they are interacting, and in that case, you have interacting S equal to 1 state, triplet state. On other case, they are triplet, but they are not interacting. They are not talking to each other because of molecular constraint, distance constraints, symmetry constraint, geometry constraint, all sort of things are there. So they remain. That means then molecule would behave with your 2 unpaired spin-based system. Then if you measure the magnetic moment, your magnetic moment would be 2.8 something root over n into n plus 2, n equal to 2 if you put 2.9 something or 8 something. And then you not still understand whether it is a non-interacting or interacting. You have to record the magnetic moment at variable temperature. That means from 300 to 4K. And you will see no cooperative interactions. That means non-interacting system. But if you have 2 unpaired electrons interacting, then what will happen? If you measure the magnetic moment at variable temperature, you would be seeing very clearly the cooperative interaction in terms of antiferromagnetic or in terms of ferromagnetic interaction. Remember all these things what I have said to you. Now if it is S equal to 1 and other system is they are antiferromagnetally completely coupled. And then your S equal to 0, so there is no way to find out. Okay. And theoretically also you can calculate it through GFT by broken symmetry analysis and all sort of things can be done. Of course, those who are PhD students, they may be knowing about it. So I'm not elaborating it further. Now S equal to 1 system, what will happen in presence? So your MS would be plus minus 1 and 0. Now once you applied the magnetic field, then your situation would be that first the zero field splitting would be there. Now, if zero field splitting, let me explain this part. The zero field splitting is the very high, right? Nickel 2 case. Zero field splitting is very high. As a result, 0, minus 1, plus 1 in presence of magnetic, and this portion is in the absence of magnetic field. This is the inbuilt quality of the molecule. If it is a very high, when they would be splitted, your frequency won't be enough to promote the molecule from here to here. Okay, so you may be missing the G equal to 2, the standard plus minus delta MS plus minus 1 transition. Not because of any issue, but because of the zero field issue, your gap would be higher. So this energy gap cannot be satisfied by the applied magnetic field, what you have done 9 GHz machine. And that is why I said the different machines are coming up. The X-band machine, K-band machine, Q-band machine, then W-band machine, high field EPR and all sort of things are very important, as because of the fact that there you are using the frequency in terms of 90 GHz, 200 GHz, 400 GHz, and common machine is only 9 GHz. Okay, and that energy would be quite good to allow this transition to happen. And as a result, you will be seeing the EPR spectrum. That is why the application of high field EPR spectroscopy. But anyway, this is one of the options. If it is too large, you won't be seeing anything under normal circumstances of 9 GHz machine or X-band machine. But high field machine, you could see it. But if the gap is not too large, then you would be seeing the EPR spectrum, even if it is even number of unpaired electrons. You would be seeing beautiful spectrum. You will be seeing it, right? Okay. Now nickel case belongs to this category, so you won't be seeing the spectrum, you will be seeing if you use the high field instrument. Now under this S equal to 1 setup, then if you apply magnetic field, what will happen? MS0 will be nothing changed, H equal to G beta MSH, so nothing would be changed, but -1 and +1 would be splitted, right? So as per the EPR selection rule, -1 would be the lower one, +1 would be the higher one, right? Now if you look at this spectrum very carefully, you will have two situations. One situation is that symmetrically they have been splitted. That means the energy gap as per the EPR selection rule, delta M is ±1. So one transition from -1 to 0, other transition is 0 to +1. Both would satisfy delta M is ±1. So you will have two transition, but these two transition would have the same energy gap or same energy, so it will appear as a single transition. Am I right? Now, if it happens like this, that these two transition energies are not same. One is this one, and other is this one. Then you will get the two transitions at G equal to 2 by following delta M is ±1. Now, because of this zero field splitting over here, now you can have another transition which is from -1 to +1. And that means delta M is equal to ±2. So delta M is 2, which is not allowed. So we call it forbidden transitions, right? Now what will happen that if these transitions, say ±1 transitions, let me explain one more thing first. Yes, first let me explain this one. Now delta M is 1 ±1, the transition energy is G beta H. If I consider this is B, these transitions, so these two transitions energy is same, G beta HB. Now if I consider this transition, that means delta M is ±2, so -1 to +2, then you see that your energy gap would be 2 G beta HA, right? And
Sir?
since frequency, hello?
Yes, sir. The beta value here is negative.
Which one?
The beta value.
Yeah, it has already been taken care of. Na? Minus, you can remember, equal to minus mu bar H. Okay.
Yes.
So minus mu bar H minus minus plus ho gaya, na?
Yes.
Very
Sir.
fast. Could you remember, na?
Yes, I remember. The beta value is negative.
So negative and minus is there, so plus ho gaya. Could you remember, na? Very fast time we said, na? Okay. So
Yes.
beta, because energy is E equal to, you could remember, or should I go back over there? Yeah. So if you put it this way, then you will be seeing that HA, the required magnetic field for this delta MS2 would be half of HB. That means if G equal to 2 transition takes place at, normally it takes place at around say 3200 Gauss, then half field signal would appear at your 1600 Gauss. And as a result, your H would be double of this one. It's inversely, na? So if it is 2, then it will be 4. Remember? Okay. So what is happening? Let us look into this thing. That this is your one particular compound with AC current. I'm taking this particular example. You see that this is T2G5, this is T2G5. Heavy metals, so low spin, low spin. So 1 unpaired electron is here, 1 unpaired electron is here. And they are in the interacting mode through this bridge. Now interacting mode means you will have G equal to 2 signals over here, and you will have half signal. You will look at, this is around 2, this is around 4. And certainly this is different than 2 because of the metal based signal over here. There is no ligand contribution. And half field signal around 4, and this is around 2. Okay. Now this is a rhombic signal because of the molecular anisotropy along X, Y, Z direction. That is very good, no problem. And here, because of the forbiddenness, this is very weak. So you fail to you cannot see the splitting pattern. This splitting pattern is expected over here also because of the symmetry. But that pattern won't be resolved because of the weakness of the signal, right? And this signal won't be appearing at room temperature, won't be appearing at 77K. It would only, or not necessarily always, mostly it appears at 4K because of the forbiddenness feature of this thing. Now, as I said, that G equal to 2 signal could be 1 and could be 2. Now, when you could expect 1, if these two are, this is -1, 0, this is +1. If these two, symmetrically splitted. Now, what happened when you have the 2 unpaired electron? That means this will have this magnetic pole will interact with the another magnetic pole, nearby magnetic pole. So some kind of induced magnetization would be there, from this side to this side and this side to this side. As a result, the energy of the -half and +half would be increased, but energy of delta M is equal to 0 unaltered, right? So the gap would be now different. When a gap is with the 0, na? So 0 to +1 gap would be more than 0 to -1, because both are in the increasing mode, right? So the gap would be different. And if the gaps are different, then these two transitions would be splitted. Otherwise, you will have one transition. So this is one example I am giving you where both are same. That means this situation, one transition which are being further splitted due to the molecular, lack of symmetry over there. But here, the two, this division is because of this. Now, when you will have, then if this is operational over here, then this you will have the two such G equal to two responses. Now, from looking at the molecule, you will not get much feeling. Okay, you can get some perception, the prima facie certain information, but you have to record the spectrum. Once you record the spectrum, then you may get the 3 situations. You may get nothing about G half. If you don't get G half, you have to think 2 items. One item is that it did not resolve properly. Then you have to go to 4K. If you miss it, that means this is non-interacting setup. And if you see it at 4K, and if you don't see at 77K, that's still fine. But you will be getting it at your 4K, that means your interacting setup. First point. Second point is whether at G equal to 2 you are getting this energy profile, or you are getting the normal energy profile like this. Okay, if dipolar interaction is strong, then you will have this situation. If dipolar interaction is not that strong, you will have this situation. And this situation corresponds to this G equal to 2, and this situation corresponds to or represents the G equal to 2 like this. Okay, so all the informations you will be getting it. And if you don't do it, no other technique will give you all sort of information about the molecular electronic structure lessons. And that is the beauty of the EPR technique. If you are really interested, that's why physicists are so much interested in this technique. Okay, so this is how it is. Now, if you go for G equal to 2 setup, now G equal to 2 setup means what? G equal to 2 setup means you have 4 unpaired electrons over there, right? Which is very common. Like say iron to high spin. Iron to high spin, what is happening? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. The 4 unpaired electron, which is very common in iron case particularly. That means you will have 4 unpaired electrons. 4 unpaired electrons means your S equal to 2 system. The S equal to 2 system means your diagram would be just this, 0, ±1, and ±2, right? It is very easy to understand it, MS. Then it will be splitted. It will be splitted. Now here the problem is again the zero field splitting. This is the zero field splitting. If zero field splitting is very strong, then you will not see anything. But it is not true. Iron to high spin, there are octahedral, so many compounds are there, good spectrum is there. Now let us assume that we are dealing with a good situation. And then you will have what? You will have like before, this diagram you have to extend one more level here, one more level here, and accordingly the splitting. Then what will happen? You will have G equal to half signal. That already we know that 2, it will come around 2. that means ms plus minus half around 2, then ms plus minus 1, that will be around 4, and then ms plus minus 2, that will be coming around 8. So if it is now you can simply apply this equation the way I put in. So your G equal to 2, that is the standard value of 3200 Gauss. This is all Gauss, or you can put it in Tesla, whatever you want, 3.2 Tesla. Then your half field signal, that means ms equal to 2, which will appear in half of this, that means 1600 through this relation 1600, and G would be 4, and then plus minus 2 if it is, then it will appear in around 800, another half, right? And G would be 8. And look at this situation. Exactly, you will get one around 8, one around 4. This is very ideal situation. Not necessarily always you'll be getting all 3. You may be missing this 2, you may be getting only this one. This one you'll be getting it anyway. So these two, whether you'll be getting or not, that depends on what molecule you are considering. Even at 4K, I have noticed that my personal experience is, so many occasions we miss it. Okay, but it depends on the molecule actually. Molecule, how strongly they are interacting. If they're weakly interacting, then one situation, if they're strongly. That is why to understand the EPR in a better way, for a multi-electron setup, one needs to do 3 things together. Then only you can understand. So that's why I'm saying that sometimes chemistry means physical chemistry type. It is so complicated. You have to do the magnetic studies, variable temperature magnetic studies through squid measurements. You have to do EPR studies, even high field EPR. You have to do calculations. All 3 if you do together, and then you sit on a table with all the data, you can have a much better perceptions. Otherwise, you have incomplete perceptions. Okay. So this is the G equal to 2 situation. Now you look at one simple molecule. This is one biological molecule, that is the hydrogenous form. So iron sulfur protein, where just one example I have picked up. And here you see the 3 iron centers. The beauty of this molecule is there are 2 different oxidation states. One is iron 3 breached to sulfur, and other is iron 2. Again, it is breached to sulfur. Okay. Now these 2 iron magnetic moment, if you measure, you will be seeing that 4 unpaired electrons. Okay. And how do you interpret it, the 4 unpaired electrons? Because these 3 are these 2 iron centers, they are coupled, low spin, they are coupled. Okay. And these iron center is in the high spin configuration, there are 4 unpaired electrons. And if you look at the EPR spectrum, okay, either at the parallel mode or at the other mode, and there is a mistake over here, you will be getting G equal to 2 signal, not well resolved. But somehow G equal to 4 signal, some response is there. But I do not take it very seriously. Little bit response is there. But G equal to 8 signal this is 8 actually. G equal to 8 signal is very prominently observed over here. So this is the difficulty always you will have in EPR. If your luck is good, you'll be getting good response like this. If your luck is not so good, luck in the sense that the molecule is not behaving the way it should have been, then you will have a little bit complex. But with your experience, you can put that way in a better sense. So where we are now, we understood one thing, the importance of G, how to calculate the G of a molecule. You also understood that what are the important associated with the G. You also understood what will be the scenario if we consider ZFS, and what will be the spectral profile. If it is multi-electronic system, and multi-electronic, which could be classified into odd number of multi-electronic, that is quite complicated, and even number of, in the case of even are relatively better, but everything depends on the fact of your zero field splitting. If zero field splitting is setup, if zero field splitting is not that strong, you may not see well resolved spectrum at all. So since you have a class, I am finishing it over here. Wish you all the best for the quiz on Monday. And remember, please join 5 minutes before 2 o'clock. We'll close it. MS team will send all the information to you by email and MS team, and it will be roughly half an hour so that I can take 1 hour class. Okay, and then hopefully I shall be able to finish whatever I wanted to finish by Monday. Because 4th you want to enjoy, why not? Thank you very much.
Sir.
Yeah.
Sir, on 4th, everyone will agree on morning hour, like 8:30 a.m. Is it
4th,
okay?
8:30.
Yes.
I have no problem if you agree and let me know. Okay, I don't want 1 student or 5 students to be agreed only. So you discuss among yourself. Whenever you are free, I'll be very happy to take one extra class, 1 class, not extra class, 1 class, which I'll be losing on 4th. 8:30, 7 o'clock, whenever you want, morning, night. I'll be happy to take that class. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so please drop a line. But before that, you discuss with all other students, because any class should reflect the consent of all students. All means most of you. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, please let me know. Thank you.